Okay. Well, hello everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're coming from. My name is John. I'm admissions officer here with HDS Admissions. Tonight is really an option to hear from our panelists about their experiences here at HDS, and hear a little bit about their personal backgrounds and those experiences overall. Questions about application deadlines, components, program information, things of that nature are really meant better for admissions. So we would encourage you to go ahead and send those directly to us at our admissions at hds.harvard.edu address. Um, and if you put those in the Q&A, I can answer some of those as we're progressing. But if you have questions for our guests, please also consider putting those in the Q&A as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our host for tonight, which is Mary Kiesling. And I'll go ahead and turn that over right now. Mary, go right ahead.
Great. Welcome, everybody. I am Mary Kiesling. I'm the Associate Director for Career Services, and we are really thrilled to be able to offer this panel. This is one of our more popular sessions, and this is a very busy time of year for our students, so we're especially grateful for these students giving up their time to be with us this evening. And to allow for as much conversation with our panelists, I'm just going to jump right into the questions. And then you can put your questions in the chat, and then we might have some room at the end as well for additional questions. So I'm just going to kick it off and ask our guests to say your name and your degree, and just share what were you doing before coming to HDS and what made you decide to go to graduate school at this point in your life. And I think we'll just do alphabetical by first name. So Amy, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. My name's Amy Sexauer. I'm a third year MDiv student. Um, Prior to coming to HDS, I have a prior career in the military. I was in the US Army. And then I briefly worked in the nonprofit sector, but I timed applying to HDS with my child being kindergarten aged. So I timed it with we basically are both going back to school at the same time.
Hey, Christy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Lindor. I'm a second year MTS student. And before I started my program, I actually spent about 20 years as a management consultant and was really in the on the business side of things. I actually spent a couple of years as a business school professor. And I decided to come to graduate school at a point where I had already started my own private consulting firm, coaching, executive coaching, and I had decided that I wanted to take that work and really kind of really anchor that work from a spiritual lens, and that was really when I decided that graduate school was probably the best choice for me, given that I had such a strong business background and wanting to be able to anchor that and balance that a bit more with a theological degree.
Juan.
My name is Juan. I'm a second year MDiv student. I worked for a hedge fund before coming here. And the reason I came now is uh, I have three daughters and they're not so young anymore that it would be unmanageable to bring them here. And also it's when my career allowed me to take a break. So I would have done this before, but the circumstances hadn't. It wouldn't have worked because things hadn't aligned. But so this was the time to do it.
Play.
Hi, I'm Leslie Lawrence. I'm a third year MDiv, and just because this is sometimes relevant, I started out as a special student and then applied for the MDiv. So this is my fourth year here. Um, Before coming here, I was working for my husband's insurance firm, selling insurance. And before that, I was a stay-at-home mom. Before that, I had a career in HR. Um, and the timing was really that my parents died and COVID happened, and I didn't want to sell insurance anymore. And this is kind of something I've wanted to do since I was in my 20s. So I finally kind of, as Juan said, everything aligned.
And what have been some of the positive aspects of coming to graduate school with more personal and professional experience under your belt? And Leslie, we'll continue with you.
Hey. Um, I think just I don't want to, I want to say maturity, but I'm not even sure that's right. I think what I'm getting is a more focused, here's the growing that I want to do at this stage in my life. And it's not even really just here's what I want to learn, but here's the direction I want to grow in. And having graduate school enable that growth. I think from a professional point of view, there's just some practical sides of that are that come to bear in some of the work. And then just on a personal perspective, some of what I can offer to my classmates comes from having more experience in the world. And so that happens.
Juan.
Yeah, so this probably doesn't come from being older, but from having less career pressure. Like many of my classmates will have to, for instance, take language courses because they will need those later on in their PhD. I mean, they have this. I mean, this is part of their career, and it's not really. I mean, I don't need the degree, so that gives me a lot of flexibility. And those of you who are, in a similar position will find that this place is great because it allows you to choose most of your classes. I don't think that's the case in other schools. And here you can do pretty much. There's two required courses if you're one required course if you're doing an MTS, and then two, and then some other stuff that you need to do if you're doing an MDiv. But it's very little. Like compared to the total number of courses, it's very little. So you get to choose your program basically. And if you can choose based on interests, is the most delightful thing because you're just exploring all day the stuff that interests you. And I think that's a flexibility and a freedom that I have now that I wouldn't have if I were doing this when I was 20. I would be thinking about the next step after that.
Christy.
So for me, I probably would say three specific things. The first would be a sense of clarity. I feel like I had a bit more of a sense of clarity and focus coming into the program, even though I wasn't sure how things what the outcome was. But I was really clear coming in about like what I'm really good at, really clear about what my limitations are, what I liked, what I didn't like, in the classroom. So that was, I feel like that was really grounding for me. So that was one. The second thing I would say at this stage, I had a bit more like a stable like environment, personally. I have my husband, we have two boys. Actually, I have one of my sons is a junior in college, and then I have a 6-year-old, like a kindergartner, and we have a lot of support. I'm very thankful we had a really good support system around the family. So that stability was also helpful. And then I think the third thing that really like made the right conditions was that I had already made the pivot from management consultant into becoming an entrepreneur. And having flexibility, I think as Juan just said, having flexibility and the ability of like how I can choose my courses, but also juxtaposed to having flexibility in my career as an entrepreneur. And I have my company is small, so we're a micro firm. We have a small number of employees, but because I had the flexibility and that support system with my business, with my team to support my clients, I was able to make it work. So I would say those are the main parts that made this possible.
Amy.
Wow, those were such good answers. I don't have anything different to say. I'll just say it in my own words. But I feel like I know myself better at this age. I'm able to show up more authentically, I think, and take advantage of some of the opportunities here in that way. There's almost too much happening here to choose from, and so having the experience to discern where you should focus is really important. I also think as an MDiv student, interested in chaplaincy, a lot of the conversations that are being had in classrooms are heavy. They're important and they're challenging, and I think I'm ready and able to lean into those hard conversations, not only because I have life experiences to bring to those conversations, but because I know that those are the conversations we need to be having, and there's no part of me that's like pulling back from it. I'm like ready to do some of this work in a way that I definitely wouldn't have been 10, 15 years ago.
After hearing what everyone else has shared, does anyone else want to add anything to what are the benefits to coming here as someone with a little bit more experience?
I think just Amy brought up one other thing for me, which is I think a lot of us older students are willing to get the conversation started that Amy's saying, like, it's such a good point, Amy, that, having being able to lean into those conversations is not a problem, but also being willing to get it going in the classroom. So thanks for that, Amy.
And as you were kind of reflecting on all the challenges that you might encounter coming into graduate school, can you talk a little bit about how the challenges were what you expected and maybe some unexpected things that emerged as challenges as you have been in the program? Leslie, we can stick with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenges were the expected ones, which is getting that brain muscle going. And I really just had to think of it as a muscle like any other muscle that hadn't been worked for a while. But as soon as I kind of get it working, it responds like any other muscle. I was really worried about writing papers. There's a fair amount of flexibility on how we write papers, not in every class, but there's a in a lot of the classes I've taken, the professors want you to be doing work that's important to you. So it's not necessarily check the box that you've done what I want you to do. I want you to do something that's going to be meaningful for you and for your future and for your growth and for your development. So that challenge didn't present itself as much as I thought it might. Other than that, I'm not coming up with any ideas about unforeseen ones, but maybe somebody else will, and it'll spark something.
Hi, Christy.
So I think one unforeseen challenge is I remember coming in two, there was actually two. So one is I remember coming in with the focus sort that was very like wide. And it goes back to the first point that was made. There's so much always happening. There's so many class offerings. There's so much events. There's so much to wait to get involved. I realized like, ooh, if I only have 2 years, I thought a lot about maybe I should extend and go and do the MDiv, just to give myself another year because I felt like I had this fear of missing out of like all the things. And I realized that, I'm already making a big sacrifice with my family to be here. And so 3 years, was not going to be like it wasn't going to be ideal. So I was like, okay, I've got 2 years. I got to take this wide focus and I got to narrow it down and I have to prioritize. And I think it goes back to the discernment that another person mentioned, and that was unforeseen. So that I had to like, and it helped me again be more focused in like where I was focusing my areas of studies. So that was unforeseen. And the second one, I'd say, I remember when I was applying, there was one specific professor that I was really, really interested in learning from her and being able to attend her classes. And I didn't realize the semester I started, she was on leave. that specific semester. And I was like, oh, like, she was one of the main main scholars that I wanted to study under. And it so happened that there was another scholar that was coming into HDS that was adjacent to some of the work that this individual had. So even though I didn't spend my first year with one of the scholars that I thought I would be studying under, I ended up expanding and meeting other scholars that was in comparable areas. So now and now this semester, I actually am spending a lot of time with the scholar now that she's back on campus. I've been able to make up for lost time and like spending time with her in her classes. So those were some challenges that they kind of worked themselves out. But I think that I was not. I think I had a very prescriptive way of how I was thinking about things, and then having to adjust and adapt. And it's all worked out. So that's been really great.
Juan?
Uh, s- some of the challenges with manage like I'm here with my family, so there's less time for my family than I would like because I have to be here at school and working, but that was expected, and it's been worth it. I mean, I do get to spend a lot of time with my family, but I would like to spend more. So yeah, you can't do both, and or you can't do both perfectly. So there's you know um, trade-offs there with how you spend your time. And then with the classes, I wasn't so much worried about papers. I was more worried about exams because I thought, these kids are going to have much better memory than I do. But that didn't turn out that well. Most classes are graded on the basis of papers, but even those that have exams, it hasn't been a big deal. So yeah, that was fine. It's mostly um, with how to manage time. That also keeps me from socializing like other people do with other classmates. I mean, I do socialize some, but not a lot. So I have to prioritize my family to going out with classmates. Say I almost never do that, and that's one cost, but it's totally worth it.
Amy?
Speaking of family cost, I'm really sorry if my dogs bark, but so far so good. Um, yeah, I think one of the challenges I expected was similar, being a parent and, assuming a lot of my classmates were not going to be parents. I just assumed that I was not going to connect with people, that I was going to have different priorities. On the one hand, my priorities are a little bit different than my classmates. I'm not able to go to a lot of the extracurricular like meetings and clubs and social events, but I do think this time has been better for my family than I thought. I think my life work balance has been better than it was in a traditional job. Um, and I will say that I've made better friends with my classmates. I think I came in thinking I was going to be old and not relate to anybody, and I've made great friends. So not only are there people of all different ages and life experiences and backgrounds, but like the 25-year-olds are great. We get along great. I wasn't expecting that. Um, yeah, I think that's it.
Mhm. Would anyone else like to talk about that? Like what is the social life like here? How have you found it to be coming in with a lot of work experience and being with people at different life stages?
I'll jump in on that one because I came here initially without my husband. He stayed home and I came up here and he's now come up here and is part of the social life. So it's really actually been there's quite a active social life on campus, and I'm 60 and I've got friends that are, as Amy said, 25, and I've got friends that are 40, and I've got friends that are 32, and they truly are lifelong friends. Um, so I think what happens here is you don't really waste time. You get into it very quickly, and you can be in the commons, and somebody will be there, and you'll say, "Let's have lunch," and then that becomes a friend for the next 3 years. It's really and there's people are having parties. I get invited to the parties. I always think it's amazing when I do. But I do. And it's my husband, there's a great thing called the HDS Jam Band that my husband plays music and he's gotten involved with that. So there's a lot of ways of trivia night is a fabulous event. There's just a lot going on, just really um, casual stuff socially. So I don't think I expected that.
I'll add a couple of thoughts here. I'm glad I'm not the only one with some of the experience I am hearing both Amy and Leslie share, and I'm like, yep. I know when I was coming in, I was a little bit worried about like the age gap, but most importantly, the experience gap and how like that would show up. And that's actually never been an issue. That's never like on the table because I think what I find with this community is that they're so actively present in the moment, whether that's in class, whether it's like you said in the comments, it's in different spaces, and it's about like that interaction with that individual and that connectivity and nothing else. And that's been really encouraging because then like it's not about titles and backgrounds, it's more about like can we connect human to human. So that's been a beautiful option. Like I think like Amy, I know I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of like the social life as much. I'm more in and out of class, but what I have been able to do, I've actually been able to within class, we have a lot of really great debates, and sometimes out here, some of my classmates make a really great point about a particular thing, and we'll connect after class, and I'll get a chance to just connect with them in that way. And I lead one of the student clubs. So I'm the president of what's called the HDS Magic Paths. And so the Magic Paths, we are a club that's focused on all alternative, we call alternative spirituality, whether that's indigenous spirituality, that's, paganism, occultism, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually it kind of works out for me. I'm able to, any of the club activities and things that we do as a community, I'm able to make it work within my schedule, so as opposed I'm trying to fit into someone else's schedule, I kind of center it around my schedule. And the community's been very kind because they know that I have a lot going on and they honor that. And so that's been a tremendous joy that I was able to kind of be the president of the club this year and create that community in a way that is both meaningful but also can also work around my schedule. So that's been really, really nice. But yeah, it was nothing like what I thought it would be socially, but it's been really good.
Great. So the next question is non-binding and optional. Does anyone have a sense of what they would like to do after they graduate or know for sure what they'll be doing after graduation? And I'll let any of you jump in on that. Go ahead, one.
Yeah, I'll do what I was doing before. So for me, the degree will really not do anything professionally. I'm doing this mostly. I mean, I'm sure I will incorporate stuff that I've learned here to my job, but it's not something that I need to grow professionally or anything like that. And I think that's the ideal position to be in if you are coming to this school. So if that's your case, I encourage you to come because then you just get to explore what you're interested in. And without any ulterior motives, you're just with people who are experts in those fields. You get to and classmates, and it's just a wonderful experience in that way. So I don't think about the utility of the degree. I think about how great it is that I get to explore what I like for 3 years.
Go ahead, Amy.
Um, I'll just share that I think I can't say I know what I'm gonna do, but I do just want to share that for me, this is a complete career pivot. So I'm doing something that I was totally not in any way prepared to do prior to coming to HDS. So came here wanting to be like a non-denominational chaplain. And I think that's still the trajectory, but now I've added a lot more interests to that. So I've considered applying for PhDs. I definitely want to write more, but chaplaincy is like still in the mix.
I'd love to-
I will apply for a residency to do CPE to become a chaplain next year. I didn't do a lot of it while I was here, but I'm currently doing my field ed at Dana-Farber. And it's really what I came in wanting to do. Um, and also to be a multi-faith chaplain. So, being a chaplain for people who don't have have something that they can kind of lean on. Um, so yeah, I've what I've pursued has been much broader than I thought it would be and different from what I thought it would be, but I still want to be a chaplain.
So I think for me, it's a slight pivot. And when I say pivot, I'm already currently doing this work, but I'm really going to anchor it more in a different light. So for example, right now, I do a lot of like consulting with corporate organizations, and I do executive coaching specifically for female leaders. And I feel like after graduation, I'm probably going to pivot more onto executive coaching, female leadership. That's going to be an area of focus for me specifically. But it's going to be a collision, so to speak, of not only business concepts and that sort, executive coaching concepts, but also bringing in spirituality, specifically African spirituality. Because about maybe a month or so before I started HDS, I became an initiated priestess within an African traditional religion. And so my whole HDS experience has been, rooted in kind of African spirituality. And I really want to bring that dimension to my clients in the future and some of the retreats and some of the work that I'll be doing with female leaders. And so it is the same. It's a little bit of the same, but it is a little bit of a pivot as well. But again, more anchored in spirituality.
Great. Okay, so people submitted a few questions in advance of this session, and a number of them focused around the application itself in light of being out of school for a while. And I guess the first question is, how did you approach getting recommendations, and how did you kind of figure out who would be a good recommender for you? And well, we can, you want, Christy, we'll stick with you for a second, and then Leslie.
Sure, sure. All good questions because I remember having the same questions during that process. I guess how I began to think about recommenders because I felt like recommenders would kind of tell a different side of me, so to speak, and thinking about it like, okay, 360, what are the different facets that I want to make sure is incorporated in my application package that I may not say in my package specifically, but I think is an important element because with I remember the essay, I think there's a word limit, there's only so much you can say, right? So how can others bring a different dimension? So I thought about, this is going to be my second master's degree. So I had a really good relationship with the dean of the first master's program. I have a master's in organizational leadership. So I reached out to that dean. She actually was a theologian. She was a Christian theologian as well. So she was very familiar with kind of HDS speak. And I'm, again, I'm coming from a business perspective. So I felt like she brought that dimension and was able to bring that language and knew some things that I didn't know at the time. So having her for me was important. I brought in one of my supervisors slash mentors. He'd been my supervisor. He was my first supervisor like 20 years ago, but I'd have a good working relationship with him, and he's seen me progress through my career. and I thought he would be a really good individual. And then I asked another individual that actually was a client of mine. So a client, again, I have a really good working relationship with her, and she was one of my first client at an organization that we did work with about 6 or 7 years ago. So I felt like, okay, if I have the client voice, I have someone who's seen me kind of grow up, professionally, and then having someone who already knew me from an academic lens. That felt like it was a nice balance to what I was sharing and what I was thinking about my area of focus to be. So that was, and again, that was my strategy, but that felt to me like a good representation. So I think it's having folks that really know you in different dimensions that can speak about your capabilities and how it helps, bolster your application practice. I think package I think is important.
So I applied twice, first as a special student and then as an MDiv. And I remember having this question when I was first applying, because I've been out of school for 35 years. Um, I had nobody that I could ask to give me an academic reference. And I was told that a supervisor would work. So, fortunately, I had been at work and I had a supervisor, and she was able to give me one reference. Uh, I'd served on a board of a theater company for a number of years. And so the current president of that theater company also wrote me a recommendation. Um, and then I had a friend she was a friend, but she also ran a writing um, a group. Um, and I did a number of writing classes with her. So she wrote me a reference. The next year I had just a person who'd been a friend of mine for years and years and years and years, and actually went to Harvard College, so that might have helped. Write me a reference, and she probably did the most thorough job of all of those people, and sort of the broadest kind of view of who I am and how I would be in a ministerial role. And I think that was another way to think of it. If you are applying for an MDiv, is somebody who can kind of think of you in a ministerial role, and it can be a friend.
Juan or Amy?
I'm happy to jump in. So I'll say I had not been to college. I think my undergrad was maybe 15 years before coming to HDS, and my undergrad GPA was very low. So I was insecure about that. Um, I chose to So first of all, I briefly addressed that in my statement. It wasn't the focus of my statement, but I chose to just acknowledge that I had a low GPA and sort of explain the reason for that. And I don't remember, I probably said something, I probably referenced things in my application that like sort of highlighted that I could academically handle it here. But I also brought that strategy to my letters of recommendation. So I chose one person who knew me intimately very well that I think thought could speak to my heart and my character. And then I chose someone that had a connection to Harvard, that had gone to school here, that I thought could speak to the demands of the community. Um, but I specifically chose someone that had a PhD, that had worked in academia, that had also worked with me. And we had a conversation beforehand where I said, hey, like one of the weaknesses of my application is like, it looks like I might not be good at college. So I need you to like explain that I can, that I'm like intelligent enough to handle it. I don't think you need, I do think depending on the programs you're coming here, I don't think you always need to flex having a big brain. Like as Leslie brought up, I think like ministry is a lot more than that. But it was an insecurity I had in my application, so I chose to kind of intentionally address it.
I had done a master's a few years before coming here, So I used, one of the letters of recommendation, I asked a professor there to give it to me. So that was to address the academic side. And then at work, I asked a client, well, an investor in my fund, to write a letter, and he knew me for, he's known me for decades, so he was able to talk about like my values, and not just about job job transactions and that sort of thing, but work transactions and that sort of thing, but more broadly about me and my personality and my values in general. And then if you were applying to an MDiv, you had to have a recommendation from someone who could speak about your ministry potential. That's probably still the case. And for that, I asked a Jesuit priest who I know from many decades too, and who knows me very well, and so he was able to give me that.
Great. And then the other question that came up was, how did you figure out what writing sample to include in your application? Juan, we can stay with you on that.
So I mentioned I did a master's a few years before, another master that was in psychology, and I used one of a paper I had written for that master's.
Great. Leslie?
I used just I did a lot of writing classes in my, I don't know, my suburban life. And I think I probably asked my writing friend that wrote me a recommendation which sample I might submit. And it was really just a creative piece about the death of my father. And so maybe that it was heartfelt seemed to be relevant.
As you were saying, I was trying to remember what I shared. So I'm a published author. I've done a lot of writing. I feel like as part of my like writing sample, I shared a number of published articles that I have. And again, these are business related topics, but I have a number that's published in like the Harvard Business Review and some other publications that I kind of referenced, if I recall. And I remember pulling out some pieces that I felt really spoke to like the why of why I wanted to go. And so the focus of, okay, how do we blend leadership with spirituality? That was like one of my areas of that I was really interested in exploring here, and how can we do that? I've been using the term heart-centered capitalism, if there's such a thing. So that was the prompt I came in with, and I felt like I pulled some published pieces to kind of do a collage to show that.
I had sort of this like, I don't know, bare bones piece of writing that I had done previously. Um, that was like nowhere near sufficient for what was required for the application. But not I didn't have anything else really to pull from, and so I chose something that I already knew something about. So I wrote a little bit about veterans and post-traumatic stress disorder, but it was something that I felt like I knew about, so I wasn't going too far out of my comfort zone. Like writing the paper was out of the comfort zone in and of itself. So I tried to pick a topic. At the time, I wasn't sure if that had anything to do with what I wanted to do at HDS. But I think that's okay. I think it was more about being able to show that I could have a cohesive argument in a paper. And I 100% just leaned on friends. Like I sent it to friends and was like, does this make any sense? Does this like, is this intelligible? Um, so for better or worse, I co-opted my friends to help me put together a passable paper.
Great. Okay, so now getting beyond the application itself, there is a lot of anxiety from people around like I've been making money for a long time. Like, how do I go from making money to making this big investment of myself and actually no longer taking any money in? And are any of you still currently working while you're a student? And how have you thought about the financial piece of all of this? Amy, we can stay with you on this.
Sure. My situation's probably a little bit unique, but I'll just be transparent. As a veteran, I have the GI Bill, which pays my tuition, which is the only reason that I could afford to come to graduate school. Um, so I have some of the financial anxiety alleviated, but the cost of living here is high. And so even with tuition paid, and a very small stipend, it is difficult. I have, some savings set aside to help get through that. Um, I am living a very different lifestyle than I did when I had a full-time job, and that's just part of the experience. I think it took me about 6 months to actually, like, we moved here and I was like, whoa, I am way overdoing it. I need to adapt to the cost of living here. And that's just little things like depending on where you're coming from, like rent in Boston is high or in Cambridge is high. Grocery bills are going to be higher. I am not working while being a student, which is a luxury. It's a choice that I made. Um, with the small caveat of the MDiv program requires you to do two field educations, and both of those internships are paid. It's not anything you can live off of, but it is something.
Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
I'll jump in. So I am working. I work full time and I'm in school full time. And I feel like the way that I've made that work, is I kind of have like I call them sections. Like so my week is like broken up into sections. So for example, and it's been able to work even next semester, which is my last semester. It's been able to work. Luckily, I take two classes a week. I take 2 days of classes a week. So typically, my schedule is Mondays and Wednesdays, let's say on campus, or Tuesdays and Thursdays on campus. And that day is like all HDS. So whether I have, I'm in class, I have study sessions, I have events that I'm going, like it's all HDS focused. And then the rest, I have like the other 3 days of the week, I focus in on my business. And I think what's interesting because I come from, I spent 20 years as a management consultant working 90, 100 hours a week. It was insane. So it's interesting. I use that same model. I'm already used to working a lot in that regard. And I just kind of switched it over to this model. So instead of doing that in a corporate environment, but having flexibility of my meetings, I've been able to make it work to where I'm working full time and doing that. I think in hindsight, it worked because 2 years goes by really fast and it's a sprint. So I knew, okay, I sat down and had conversations with my family to say, look, this is what I'm doing, just want your support. So we have a lot of support around us to make sure that the things at home do not get missed. The things, the doctor appointments and all the things for my kids and my husband. So, but again, there's a lot that goes into making that work. Which is why I knew I only had a 2 year limit to make this schedule work. I wish I could stay for the third year for an MDiv. I really wish to, but I think 2 years is enough to get what I need, but also be fair to my family and the schedule. So
Oh, I'm mute, Leslie.
Sorry, I just, I was able to do this because when my parents died, I got some inheritance and th that enabled me to pay for my tuition. And I have a husband who's gainfully employed. So I hate to say this, but I'm lucky. I'm a lucky one, and I'm 60. Um, a lot of my friends find ways to make money in the summer, as well as getting the field ed, or they have to work. And interestingly, my first year here, I remember talking to friends who were really strung out about being able to afford school. And, it's not me, but I had a friend who was a financial planner get on the phone with them. And I think basically what she did was say, this is a limited window. Don't, you take on the debt was her advice, which I don't, she really felt that because it was a limited window, you give your focus to this special time and studies. And I think it's, I that's just the one little insight maybe I have. Because I was lucky.
Yeah, like Leslie, I too was lucky, and I'm doing it out of savings. But yeah, I come from Mexico, so it's a lot more expensive here than there. But yeah, I'm doing it out of savings, so that's fortunate. I don't have to worry about where the money will come from.
Thank you, everybody. So I know that we're really, this time has gone by really fast. We only have a few more minutes left. And I thought maybe we could just use this time to share some final thoughts about people who are like, oh, I would kind of like to do this, but it feels like there's a lot to lose. And I don't know, is there enough to gain? What would you say to someone who is unsure about making this commitment? And if you had to say, I think you should do it if, and I think you maybe shouldn't do it if, and anyone's welcome to kick that off.
Do it. There are a couple questions in the chat that I just picked up. Like somebody asked if you come in from the Cape. I've known a couple of people who've commuted from the Cape. The other thing we discovered, my husband and I, was that your spouse or your partner can audit classes if you are a full-time student. And that's been life-changing for myself and my husband because he's gotten so involved and has audited some classes. So it's like a little bonus.
Go ahead, Amy.
I just want to echo Leslie. I feel like probably Leslie and I are not the people to talk you out of it. So if you need someone to give you like a hard left and right limit, we're not the people for that. Obviously, if it's just like too hot. I mean, I am just again to be transparent. I'm a single parent. I am probably acquiring more debt than I am making money by being here, but I have found the program to be just life-changing. Sounds so cliche, but it's such a gift to take time out of the grind of work and reflect on deep spiritual issues that are important to me. This is a career pivot, so it's a choice to come here to do a different job. But even if you're coming here for some other reason, there's so many beautiful, wonderful people here who also want to make the world a better place. And I just feel like no matter what, that's gonna make you live your life in a better and different way.
So I think my answer is not, it doesn't have a don't do it if, it's more do it. I think honestly, I feel like if you're on this Zoom and you feel called to this program, answer the call. I almost talked myself out of it several times because I just thought my background is way out of left field. I did not have a religious background. I didn't have a philosophy background. I was a marketing and a computer science major as an undergrad, and then I had a organizational leadership, right? And then just all core business. And I was insecure about that because I was like, well, maybe I'm not the type of student that they're looking for. And I think what was fascinating and what drew me to HDS was the pluralistic community that that HDS has. And I got a chance to attend events. So that was actually what convinced me to apply because I attended a number of events as a perspective. And I did that for maybe a couple years before applying. But I almost talked myself out of it. And when I think about why, it was more out of fear. And it was fears that I was like conjuring up in my mind that were not existent. And one of them was age. I was like, wow, I haven't, my last degree was in 2009. And I'm like, that's a long time. Am I going to be able to keep up with the pace of the class? Am I going to, so I was really worried about, what happens if something with my son is in school, so I was really worried about a lot of things. And I felt like I was letting fear make the answer. But if you are here, you're called. I think it takes a special type of person to be called to a divinity school program. And if you're here, you feel called, answer the call.
I don't think I can speak to the situations in which many people are like there are trade-offs to coming, and if you're doing this, you won't be doing other things, and professionally it may not make sense for you. I don't know, but if you're in a situation similar to mine where you're intellectually interested in things you want to explore, and you're not putting your career at risk, and so you're just choosing whether to come explore what you're interested in or not, I think you should do it. What I was worried about is, I'll probably spend a lot of time in, doing things or getting into stuff that I won't really like, that won't be interesting to me, that I'll be wasting my time. That really, there's very little of that. I mean, there's almost none of that because you get to choose your courses and the professors, and there's a big selection. So there's, if you have any interest whatsoever in intellectual stuff, you'll be really happy here because you can customize it to your liking. So if that's the case, I would definitely do it. And the professors are really good, and the students are really good. So whatever area, however esoteric the area you're interested in is, you'll find you can customize your program to explore that area. And there'll be other areas you didn't know about that will, you learn about other stuff that's exciting and interesting, and then you'll go into those. So for that sort of person, I think it's a great program. And it's not only the stuff that's available at the Divinity School, it's also stuff that's available at the other schools, the other theological schools around, and at the college and the other Harvard schools. So there's like a lot to explore from. So if what you want is to um, explore your interests, I don't think there's a better place.
Leslie.
I just was going through the chat. Somebody asked about special student. I did it part-time, two classes each semester, and it was my way of figuring out if I wanted to do this full-time. Somebody asked about the spiritual side of Harvard Divinity School, and I would say that varies enormously, depending on how spiritual somebody is. For me, I have grown spiritually here much more than I anticipated I would. I really thought I was coming into an academic program and not one that would really challenge me, challenge my spiritual growth, and it's done that. And there's an enormous amount of resources for spiritual engagement. And somebody asked about the field intensity, and I think it varies. And you can do it during summer, which I wish I'd done, but I never did. But yeah, that's probably a more involved question that admissions can answer. I just wanted to answer a couple of specific things that I saw. since we're running out of time.
Yes, this time went by very quickly, and I will say that for the participants on this call, I think this panel has really given you a sense of the flavor of the types of folks who are here, and my heart feels so full just hearing all of your stories and all of your candid advice. And um, I know John and I are both extremely grateful for your time and your um, uh, authentic selves that you brought to the table today. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you for everyone who made the time to listen and use this information to make your next decisions about what you want to do with regard to applying to the program, and definitely partner with admissions to make sure that this really does feel like a good next step for you. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you again, everyone. If you have any questions we didn't get to in the chat, please go ahead and send them to admissions@hds.harvard.edu. Thank you so much, Mary, for your great hosting tonight, and thank you so much to our panelists for your great insight. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.